Colorado shooting, there's a possibility that James Holmes, as many have noted, could just be plain evil. Could just be plain sadistic, could just be plain whatever. But, for lack of a better term, I have a different take on what happened. From what I've read so far, James Holmes was apparently a very smart kid. In fact, one of the smartest. And, by the way, I read that he studied at UC Irvine. And, as I said, was very smart. I read this on Twitter. Someone who's following the story tweeted that. And, so James Holmes was very smart. He also obviously had a lot of time on his hands. He could booby-trap his apartment. He had 2 guns. He planned what he planned and murdered at least 12 people. And unfortunately, probably more are gonna, for lack of a better term, pass away as a result of what he did, probably because of injuries or whatever else. And as I said, this guy obviously booby-trapped his apartment, had 2 guns, planned what he planned, and he was 24 years old, so you take, and even his family released a statement saying their condolences and what one needs to say, obviously, during a tragedy. So, this guy, James Holmes, very smart, had a lot of time on his hands, planned what he planned, and differed from his family. And, as I said, as others have noted, he could have just been plain evil, plain sadistic, but there's also an aspect of, because he was a very smart kid, because he considered himself even to be like the Joker, because he had so much time on his hands, because he differed from his family, he was probably a very, very lonely kid. And that doesn't excuse his behavior at all. In fact, at first when I saw a picture of the tragedy that someone had assembled into, for lack of a better term, into a kind of editorial, memorial, kind of political cartoon, if you will, shtick, I thought about, for some reason, that song, How Do You Get That Lonely? And I guess it was because I was thinking about, like, the scenes in the How Do You Get That Lonely video, and, like, about tragedies and police being at the scene and all that, but then I thought, wait a minute, you know, the reason I could be thinking about this is because, again, I'm not excusing James Holmes' behavior, but he could have been a very lonely kid, as I said, had a lot of time on his hands, and I think about those lyrics, you know, did anybody notice the writing on the wall? And in terms of his parents, as the lyrics go, now I'm not blaming anybody, we all do the best we can. So, also, James Holmes is 24 years old, so at this point, you can't blame his parents, but as the lyrics go again, did anybody notice the writing on the wall? And in terms of the parents, now I'm not blaming anybody. All you could do is say, well, it was James Holmes' fault. But again, you have to ask, for a kid who was very smart, very different from his family, very much having time on his hands, was he a lonely kid? And did nobody notice the writing on the wall?